Prithvi Shantirantarikshagam Shantir Dyav Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapa Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shanti Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shanti Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra Sukhinas Santu Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Sarvastaratu Durgani Sarvo Bhadrani Pashyatu Sarvas Sadbuddhimapnotu Sarvas Sarvatra Nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the Divine Presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om.
Morning. We're going to sing the song on the last page of your book, The Inner Light. Swamiji asked me if I would say a few words in introduction. I usually try to select a song that has something to do with the title of Swamiji's remarks for the Sunday. And when I saw Why Travel for today, I wrote him back and told him this was the first song that popped into my head, which was a song that the Beatles did. George Harrison, I think, had some connection with Vedanta. And the gentleman, Juan Mascaro, who translated a lot of Eastern texts, including the Gita and the Tao Te Ching, sent George a copy of his Tao Te Ching translation and requested that he set this particular sequence to music. And so the original text is on the bottom of the page there. So they recorded it with a group of great scientific musicians. I know one name I recognize is Mario Prasad Sharasha, the great flutist. But in any event, we'll give this a try.
Satoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. So, why travel? Now, having traveled quite a bit of the world in my life so far, I have in the recent weeks been giving a great deal of thought to this question, why travel? Sometimes I think that while there is a range of questions we can ask about anything in life, anything that begins with what, how, why, and so on, I think sometimes we ask some of the questions at certain stages in life. And usually, when we are very young, when pretty much many things in life we are encountering for the first time, it's usually, what did we generally tend to ask more as we see new things. Then as we grow a little older, then we say, how? How does it happen? Or when? How, when? And then, usually as we grow older still, with age, we begin to ask the question, why? More. Sometimes it can happen earlier on in age as well, sometimes due to greater spiritual maturity. If not, then over age, most people begin to ask why. And I think many of us probably are in that stage of life now, when besides what, when, and how, we need to ask the question why a bit more often. In fact, I sometimes think that for spiritual seekers, why questioning is probably more helpful than other questions. If we begin to ask ourselves the question why more often, we might discover that there are a lot of things that we do in life, the lot of ways we think in our life, the lot of ways things we say in our lives are pretty much useless. And therefore I oftentimes think that when you are thinking in a certain manner, it's helpful to pause and say, why am I thinking like this? And if you don't get any good answer to that why, it means you shouldn't be thinking that way. Or if you find yourself saying some things, just pause mentally and say, why am I saying this? And if you don't find a good answer, don't say it. Many of us might find ourselves speaking a lot less than we do, because a lot of time we say things and don't really know why we are saying those things. And of course, with the actions that we do, there is so much useless activity going on in our personal lives in terms of thinking, speaking, and doing, that if we find no good answer to the question why, and we eliminate those actions, those thoughts, those words from our lives, we might find that we have a lot more time and a lot more energy available to us at the end of the day. And so that's why travel? A lot of times, many of us tend to find that life gets monotonous. And the only way to break the monotony is to do something different. And in a way, one of the reasons why all of us look forward to weekends or look forward to vacations is an admission of the fact that my weekdays are not so much fun. I mean, if the weekdays are fun, there is no special reason why I should be specially looking forward to weekends. So because I look forward to weekends, it means that there are a lot of things I would like to do. There are a lot of things I love to do. Unfortunately, I cannot do it on weekdays or my working time. And therefore, I need to find a weekend or a vacation, which is kind of sad that I cannot find much fun, meaning, and joy in my working time, because most of our life is really spent working. And if that's the time we don't particularly enjoy, then there's some problem there, if all that we have to look forward to is weekends. And so there's no doubt that a shorter or a longer travel that we may undertake does help to break the monotony of life. And that's definitely one advantage many people find of traveling. But more than that, traveling also broadens our consciousness. When we encounter diversity, when we meet people, we see things that we have not seen before, especially if you're traveling to a place you have not been before. Or traveling to distant lands, when people speak a different language, they have different customs, different ways of doing things, different kinds of foods that they eat. There's a lot that this kind of difference of moving among strangers, what it first of all shows us that the world is much bigger than this tiny bubble in which my daily life revolves. But also that my way of doing things is not the only way. That the food that I eat is not the only food in the world. The language I speak is not the only language. I mean, intellectually, most of us know it's not like a big revelation. But sometimes to kind of know this at the back of the mind and actually go and encounter, it's quite a revelation in many ways. I was for many years in southern part of India, in Chennai, before I came here. And I really didn't know much of that language spoken locally. I really still don't know much of it. And so I lived 15 years in a place, virtually not knowing 90% of the talk that was going on there. And that has its own advantages, really. And unless you're an extremely curious person or a suspicious person, then it's difficult for you to live in a place where you don't understand the language. It's like always, what are they saying? Are they speaking about me? But if you're not particularly curious, it gives you so much freedom, because you find yourself having a lot more time to yourself, since you're almost cut off. That the ignorance of the language can help you, give you a lot more time. Apart from that, the reason I mentioned this is to show that once I was coming down from I was living on the second floor, and I was coming down from my room, and the monastery where I was living, there was a dispensary, which the center ran to cater to the needs of the poor in that locality. And so many, although it is an urban center, but many from the villages in the outskirts used to come to our dispensary, because everything was provided free medical care was given. And so there was this one young man, must have been about 15 or 16 years old. As I was coming down the stairs, he came running and he wanted to ask some question. But he had come from a village, he didn't know English, and he spoke in Tamil. And I had enough of the sixth sense about that language, having lived there for a few years, to not really know every word that they were saying, but enough idea to know whether what they were saying needed any response or not. Because a lot of times people used to come and just say something and they really didn't need any response. So I could just smile and nod and say, and then they were happy, I was happy, and just went off. So rather than having to explain to everyone, I'm sorry, I don't know the language. But there were occasions when I knew they were asking a question, they needed a response, and that time I had to tell them I don't know that. But I knew one sentence in that language to let them know that I don't know that language. So here is this one young man, he came, he was like agitated about something, and then he asked me a question. And I told him in his language, I'm sorry, I don't know Tamil. And the look that he gave me look of such profound compassion, because I think he hadn't encountered anyone who couldn't speak his language in that small circle in which he, and he just looked at him and said, Tamil theriyada? It was like, you don't know Tamil. It's like, how will you survive in this world if you don't know the language? So I just mentioned that, of course, many of us are intelligent enough to know that there are many languages in the world, but only when you kind of go to a place and you find people speaking, doing things in entirely different ways, speaking in a different language, and leading meaningful, happy lives. It suddenly then broadens our consciousness. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And therefore, we become more accepting, we become more understanding. That's definitely a big plus about traveling. When Swami Vivekananda returned from the West and went to India, he stressed a lot and encouraged Indians to travel. And this was, remember, more than 100 years ago, when by and large, most people in the Indian subcontinent were within Indian subcontinent. In fact, in orthodox circles in India, going across the seas was prohibited. By that, they really meant that you are no more a part of the community. Many who had crossed the seas, so to speak, when they went back, when they returned, were not accepted in the social circles. This might surprise many of you. When Swami Vivekananda, he came to the West, and of course we know the great impression he made, he created history. When he returned to India, he became a big celebrity. He was welcomed everywhere, and we know he's in history books, in Indian history books all over. But there was a small section of the orthodox circles in India, even at that time, they were not happy that he had crossed the seas. The Kali temple, in which Ramakrishna worshipped, where Vivekananda's spiritual life began, when Vivekananda returned to India, he was not allowed to enter the Kali temple. He said, you have become polluted as a result of going to the West. So there were these orthodox circles who didn't encourage traveling. And because of this restriction, for centuries, people were loath to going to distant places. And Swami Vivekananda wanted to encourage Indians. And I think his message has gone through, since now pretty much in any part of the world you go, you find many people of Indian origins spread pretty much in most countries in the world. So this is what Swamiji said in a lecture he gave in India. He said, we cannot do without the world outside India. It was our foolishness that we thought we could, and we have paid the penalty by about 1,000 years of slavery. More than 600 years, India was under the rule of Muslims, the Mughals, and then for nearly 350 years, it was a British colony. So it was close to 1,000 years, the Indians were not politically free. That we did not go out to compare things with other nations, did not mark the workings that have been all around us, has been the one great cause of this degradation of the Indian mind. We have paid the penalty. Let us do it no more. All such foolish ideas that Indians must not go out of India are childish. They must be knocked on the head. The more you go out and travel among the nations of the world, the better for you and for your country. If you had done that for hundreds of years past, you would not be here today at the feet of every nation that wants to rule India. The first manifest effect of life is expansion. You must expand if you want to live. The moment you have ceased to expand, death is upon you. Danger is ahead. I went to America and Europe, to which you so kindly allude. I have to, because that is the first sign of the revival of national life, expansion. And that's what I was referring to. That traveling expands our mind, takes us out of our kind of a frog in the well attitude. In a letter that Swami Vivekananda wrote in 1892, he said, you see, we must travel. We must go to foreign parts. We must see how the engine of society works in other countries and keep free and open communication with what is going on in the minds of other nations, if we really want to be a nation again. And we see that this kind of a tension, if you like, has been going on not just in India, but in different parts of the world. And both these forces are operating. There is one force which says we must go out, we must build bridges. And I mean the whole thing about globalization, the world trade and so on, that's a way of kind of connecting. And then there is the other force which says, no, we're just going to build walls. We are just going to break all the bridges. No more. So these things have been throughout history. People wanting to go out and people wanting to restrict of that going outward. The other things, of course, that we benefit from as a result of travel is learning of new languages, learning, for those of us who like to eat, new recipes. Sometimes just eating one's own food that we are familiar with, we might think that that's all there is. But sometimes when we go out and taste other foods, we might either love them, love the food, or if we don't love the food, we suddenly might realize the value of the food that we are familiar with more. And so either way, it helps. We also make new relationships, meet new people, make new connections, and learn even to do familiar tasks in a different way. There's never just one way of doing things. As we grow older, we hopefully realize that. There is never one way, and therefore, if we know one way of doing things, it's good to be open to explore, to understand other ways of doing the same thing. And we might discover it's not necessary that the other ways are necessarily always better, but at least we know them. And if we know that they are better, we must have the openness to adopt them. And if we find that they are not better, then we realize we realize that the way we are doing is better. So either way, it's a win-win situation. The other benefit of traveling, of course, is that it makes us stronger. It makes us more mature. Most people who have traveled a lot, if we look at our own lives or if we look at other people who have done traveling, we find that they are stronger in many ways, because travel, no matter how meticulously you plan your travel, always be ready for surprises. Things are never going to go the way you thought they would. It's not just while traveling, even if you're not traveling really. That's just life. So it sometimes is, and then should we say, well, should we never plan then? No, I think it's good to plan, but always recognize that the plans may not always go the way you wanted them to be. Yet another benefit of traveling is that, as I mentioned briefly earlier, that we may learn to value the things back home, because there are many things that we already have with us even before we set out to travel, but many of those things we may have taken for granted. Many of those things we may not have recognized the value of. Then suddenly we go out and then look at the different things available, and then we suddenly recognize a lot of the things that we have but which we had ignored. Now, for spiritual speakers especially, so far what I have said about traveling pretty much applies to all of us, whether we have any special interest in spiritual life or not. But especially for spiritual seekers, traveling provides us an opportunity to remember our ideal, our teaching, our practice, even outside of our familiar spaces. And it can feel different. Reciting, for instance, a Sanskrit hymn, or reciting passages from the Upanishad. I remember years ago I was in Assisi and sitting in St. Francis Basilica, and sitting there and mentally repeating Upanishadic passages. Now the setting is so different, and then it might sound odd. I wasn't doing it aloud. I was just doing it to myself. But doing it there, or even say sitting in the Canadian Rockies and then reciting from the Gita or whatever tradition we come from. So sometimes doing the things, the spiritual practices that we do in unfamiliar settings puts them in a very different context. And what is interesting here is that suddenly the place becomes somehow more familiar. This place suddenly begins to feel like home. And many spiritual seekers have experienced that you go to a place, everything feels different. And then you just find a quiet corner and meditate. Meditate the way you meditated back home. And suddenly the new place doesn't appear as strange anymore. That's when, as Holy Mother used to say, no one is a stranger, my child. The whole world is your own. And one of the ways that we recognize the world to be our own is that you go in any corner of the world and the things that are sacred to you, the prayer, the meditation, or some familiar sacred image or a symbol that you carry, and then wherever you go, it's there with you, and suddenly you feel your home is there wherever you go. So these are some of the benefits that come for travel. And most of these we are familiar with, so it isn't as if I've given you some shockingly new information. But it's good to recognize and remember what are the things that we learn when we travel. Now that is not to say that traveling has only advantages. There are certain risks involved, besides the risks of your baggage not arriving in time. There was this story about a person who was checking in 2 bags, and he told while checking, and he said, I want this bag to go to Berlin, and I want this bag to be sent to London. And then the airline person said, sorry, you can't do that. We can check in these bags only for your destination. He said, no, last time when I traveled, you did that, so it's possible. But we do have to, when you travel, these things are inevitable. Your baggage may not arrive in time. There may be theft. You have to be careful, especially if you're traveling alone, to take care of all your bags. It can happen especially if you go to a place when you're not familiar with the language. People oftentimes try to take advantage of tourists, knowing that they don't know much about the local places and things like that. So one has to be careful. And so sometimes people can come with very bitter experiences when they travel. But there is also the other danger, that we might return home not having learned anything new from a travel. We might return home more exhausted, more jet-lagged, and more frustrated than before. How many times has it often happened that we have gone on a vacation, we said, oh, I'm just tired of working, and then go for a vacation, and then come home and find that you're more tired. So just as we need to recover from our work, oftentimes people need to recover from their vacation. Then we might say, well, how has this vacation helped me? If it has not brought me the rest that I wanted, if it has just brought me more stress and worry. And so those are the risks involved while traveling. For spiritual seekers, again, while a change is good, sometimes many spiritual seekers have found that travel can also sometimes be disruptive in their spiritual practice. And we know, those of us who practice daily know that if there is a break, then it's not always easy to kind of come back and resume the routine. It just takes time. Once your habits are set, habits for your prayer, meditation, study, and then that momentum, that regularity will take you without much effort. But once there is a break for whatever reason, and if you somehow, and travel, if we are not able to maintain, for instance, a daily practice of prayer and meditation, then that break can be a much bigger break than we imagine. And then that's one of the dangers to get the practice back on track. But these are not the only kinds of travel possible. Among monastics, there is a word in Sanskrit called parivrajaka or pravrajana. In Vivekananda's wandering years, you'll find in his biography, sometimes it is referred to as the parivrajaka days. Now, pra is a prefix in Sanskrit. Pravrajana. Vraja means to go forth. So pravrajana in Sanskrit really means going forth, wandering. And while there are different monastic orders in the Vedantic tradition in India and in other traditions as well, for centuries, the monastics were just traveling from place to place. The only time they did not travel in the Indian subcontinent were the 4 months of the rainy season. And not just the Vedantic, even the Buddhist monks. The 4 months in the rainy season. So they have a distinct rainy season in tropical countries. And so that was the time the monks didn't travel. They stayed in one place. And that's why sometimes that period, what called Chaturmasya. Chatur comes from the word 4 and 4 month. The 4 monthly period when they didn't travel. But the other 8 months in a year, most of these monks traveled. And they slept under trees or found some local temple. And the food they just got by begging. So that was the life. In fact, even today, the majority of monks in India don't live in monasteries. The majority of the monks just travel. And one of the sacred pilgrimages in the Indian tradition is that they will travel right up to the source of the river Ganges in the Himalayas, collect water from the glacier from when the Ganges starts, then carry that water all the way to the southern part of India, a place called Rameshwaram. And that's where then there is a Shiva temple there. So the water that they have personally carried from the source of the Ganga, they will go and then pour it over Shiva in the southern part. After having done that, then they travel all the way back again, pick up more water. And so that's how it goes. We know that many of the disciples of Ramakrishna, after Ramakrishna's passing, went forth wandering. Swami Vivekananda himself, from north to south, the length and breadth of India, he traveled. Most of it by walking, sometimes by train. Among the disciples of Ramakrishna, Swami Akhandananda was one who had this great fascination for traveling, and he went in the Himalayas, into Tibet in those early days, just going forth. So there was this traveling or wandering among monks was considered a sacred activity, because that literally put you depending on no one but God. Where you didn't have any roof under which to stay. So wherever the night fell, you found a good tree to sleep under or some temple courtyard to sleep in. And then food, whatever by chance people would offer. So that total dependence on God was a big gain that these monastics had. But this external wandering in itself definitely has some benefits. But that's only a somewhat superficial benefit, one would say. Well, dependence on God is not really a superficial benefit, but all of this benefit that we get through external wandering is meant to make us strong to carry out internal wandering. So for all spiritual seekers, whether you are monks or not, it's not only for monastics. For every spiritual seeker, we have to become wanderers, but wanderers in our inner life. And this is a 2-stage process, really. just as we wander in the external world, we know like this is my place, this is where I live, let me now go out and see new places. That's what we generally, that's why we travel. But for a spiritual seeker, one who is, and I'm taking the word spiritual seeker very seriously, not just in a kind of a casual way. A spiritual seeker in the one sense, one who is seeking the spirit. And spirit is something which is different from the material world that we encounter. Now, in order for me to seek the spirit, I must first have acquired at least a measure of distance from the material world. Because if I'm so much an inseparable part of the world in which I live, then it will not be easy for me then to go forth in search of spirit. Because how can I separate myself from something from which I am inseparable? So the first step really is to recognize that yes, we have all these great connections in the world, but in some level, at some dimension, I'm also separate from the world. And this idea gets reinforced through many teachings in different texts over the centuries. In fact, one of the texts in the Indian tradition has this saying, which it says that no matter how close people are to you, no matter what strong connections and bonds you have in this world, no matter how inseparable we might feel ourselves to be from our community, from our country, from people around us, the most that any of these people can accompany us up to is up to the cremation ground or to the cemetery. The journey beyond that has to be done alone. So after death, we are separable. We are not as inseparable from one another as we think. And so that's why even I think it was Aristotle who said that great philosophers are continually engaged in the practice of dying. Now, practice of dying, this is a very positive, healthy way to look at death. There is a kind of a very negative weakening. I'm not talking about being obsessed with the idea of death. That's unhealthy. But a healthy way of thinking of death is to recognize, sure, with all these connections I have in this world, a time is going to come in my own life when all of these bonds will be broken, whether I like it or not. Nature herself will break all the bonds. And if I'm not prepared now, how will I be prepared then? Because I don't even know when it's going to happen. None of us we would like to have pleasant surprises. We don't want unpleasant surprises. And death can be an unpleasant surprise if we are not prepared for it. And so what an intelligent person would do is, well, if there is going to be a time in my life, at some unspecified time, we don't want it to be too soon, but it's going to come, when all this thing will go. Then, at least mentally, let me try to do kind of a thought experiment and see whether I can be by myself without all these supports that I presently have. Now, if I can do that in my mind, then I will have the freedom to turn to spirit, to turn to the divine, to turn to God. Because we will not be able to turn to our spiritual ideal fully as long as these bonds are so tight. Now, I'm not suggesting that you break the bonds. You don't have to do that. These bonds will, as I said, nature will take care of that sooner or later. Right now, I don't have to break any bonds. But inside my mind, to be aware of the fact. It's a little bit like, well, hopefully the spring will come soon after this storm on Tuesday. But But when the spring is around, when spring is around and beautiful, we see flowers growing everywhere, and you go out into the garden and you cultivate all those flowers and you see wonderful thing. Even when you are enjoying the beauty of the flowers, it's good to be aware at some corner of the heart, one day fall is going to come and a winter is going to come again, and northeaster will come again, and then these flowers are going to go away. That doesn't mean you can sort of stop enjoying the flowers. You can still enjoy the flowers. But when the time comes and the flowers dry and all goes away, you will know, well, I knew it's going to happen. You will still be yourself because you are prepared for it. But if you're not prepared for it, then you're going to have a breakdown. So that's what I'm saying about recognizing the inevitability of life. If we have done that, then we will have the freedom to go forth at the inner travel. So there is this external space travel. Now there is this travel in the inner space. In fact, that's exactly the word that's used in the Upanishads. Space, akasha, the space of the heart. Now we might say, well, there doesn't seem to be too much space to travel here. But actually there is. See, we see ourselves merely from a kind of a spatial standpoint. The world outside looks so much bigger. Then you say, well, look inside, but inside is like such a small space here. How much can you meditate in the heart? It just seems such a small space. But I think we are completely missing the point. If we can truly look into the heart and the real heart, and again, we have spoken earlier on many occasions about what is meant by the term heart. It's not the physiological heart. It's not even the emotional heart. There is the spiritual heart within us. And if we have a glimpse of that heart, we will see that that is much vaster than even this material universe. All of these galaxies and everything can fit into one corner of that spiritual heart. So don't be worried that there is not much space. There's a lot more to wander inside than outside. And as we go wandering inside, we will discover different things. And sometimes the Upanishads then speak about those things in terms of layers. The three layers, they call it the sthula sharira, sukshma sharira, karana sharira, the gross body, the subtle body, the causal body. Or sometimes they speak in terms of coverings. The covering, there is this, of course, physical covering. But then within that, there is a layer of the prana, the covering of the vital force. Then there is a covering of the mind, there is a covering of the intellect, there is a covering of the ego. So when we travel inside, we'll be able to uncover all of these things, encounter. Just as when we travel outside, we see different places. When we travel inside, we will see these different layers. And then when we reach that goal, we'll really, after traveling inside for a long time, the goal will be, we will discover ourselves. To take all the trouble and do all these things, and finally what we find is we find our own selves. And that was that beautiful song. Thank you for that song today. This is what that burden of the song is, that it's possible that after all this traveling that we may initially want to do, ultimately what we find is it all comes back to ourselves. And it might seem then futile. Why did I go about traveling everywhere if ultimately I was just going to come back to my own self? But this is not to say that all of that traveling was useless totally, because all of that traveling was necessary. It was necessary for me to go and do all that travel, because unless and until let me put it this way. If we want something, we are going to keep wanting it as long as we feel it is something absolutely necessary, as something that I really need. The only way I'm going to stop wanting it is when I completely understand I can live without it. So that's the advantage of traveling. The more you travel, you get all the benefits, you learn, your consciousness broadens, everything. But after doing all of this, the greater the maturity, the greater the strength that we acquire as a result of traveling, we know that there is a much greater, deeper subtler place that I need to go to in order to discover what will make my life truly meaningful, which will bring me to a state of fulfillment that no other fulfillment in life can give. There is a story that Ramakrishna used to tell about a bird that sat on the mast of a ship. So he said the bird sat on the mast of a ship and then fell asleep, and must have fallen in a really deep sleep because the ship set sail and went out into the ocean, and then this bird suddenly discovers, and wanted to go back to land because the bird's nest was on the land. And so the bird says, but didn't know which way the land was because the ship had gotten far out into the sea. So then the bird flew in the eastern direction for a long time and then didn't find any land. And its wings started getting tired. So it just came back again and sat on the mast. And he thought, maybe the land is on the western side. So the bird flew towards the west. No sight of any land. Once again came back. Went to south, went to north. Tried all directions and then didn't find land anywhere. And they just said, I'm just going to sit here. I'm so tired. My wings are so tired, I can't go anywhere. And just sat there. After a few days, the ship then reached another port. Already the land was there and it was happy. So all of the traveling that we do, all of the, and traveling in every sense, physically, mentally, emotionally, whichever way we wander forth into this world, is in many ways to tire our wings. Now, if the bird were intelligent, the bird would say, my wings are tired, let me just sit here, and ultimately the land will be found. But if the bird is not intelligent, I'm just going to keep on trying until someday I may not be able to return back to the mast at all, and just tired and just fall into the sea. So we have to be intelligent birds. So let's do quite a bit of traveling, but then let's ask this question, why? And then realize that let me then travel now the areas, the spaces I may not have traveled before. And if I'm able to then go inside, I'll find that travel, the ultimate travel, the spiritual travel would be going inside. So outside and inside are relative terms. So rather than, I'm not saying all travel is bad, I'm not saying all travel is good. All that I'm suggesting is that no matter where we go, at the very least, every day we are commuting to work. That's also a form of travel. So every little bit of travel that we do on a daily basis or occasionally, let's make them occasions that we learn something from everything that we do. Because as long as we are learning, we are growing. And as long as we are growing, we are going nearer to God. The moment we stop learning, all progress stops. That's the risky part. And therefore, this why questioning is very helpful. So just as we can ask the question with regard to travel, we can ask the question with regard to why to everything. Sometimes when people come to me and say they would like to meditate, and almost the first question I ask them is, why do you want to meditate? Because meditation is not just kind of a one standard, one practice fits all kind of a thing. So what kind of practice we have will depend on what I want to get out of it. And therefore simply saying I would like to meditate is not enough. I need to ask myself, why do I want to meditate? And I think all spiritual seekers need to do that. When you have a daily prayer, you meditate, you study, you want to help other people, good to ask, why do I want to pray? Why do I want to meditate? Why should I be good? Why should I want to help people? And see if you get some intelligent answers. Because it's good to do things knowing why we are doing it, rather than doing things just because everyone is doing it, or just doing things because everyone says it's a good thing to do. That's no way to live. So let's hope that we ask this why question to ourselves more and more in everything that we do. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhur. Next Sunday, our subject will be renunciation myths. On Tuesday and Saturday, our meditation and Arati will continue. Tuesday, I'm very doubtful. So let me just say only Saturday we'll have Arati and meditation. But I will still send out an email. If by chance, if the storm suddenly changes its path and we don't have, if the traveling is easier, but almost take it for granted that Tuesday we probably will not have meditation. So Saturday we'll have meditation as usual. On Wednesday, hopefully, things might have settled down after the storm. So we'll try to have a Gita on Wednesday. But if there is a cancellation, again, please check the center's website or I think it's channel 5 sometimes they'll announce. Or just email me if you're not sure, if you would like to come for the Gita class. But unless you hear from me, the Gita class will be there, but Tuesday, very uncertain at this point. Okay, so let's do the prayer on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Aura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.